Okay, as Paul mentioned in his very generous introduction, in 2002, the Photographers Gallery gave me an amazing opportunity to look at 20 years' work, working with a very young curator who was at the gallery at the time, but is no longer, somebody called Jeremy Miller, who was actually a student of mine in Nottingham in something like 1990, who'd done an absolutely brilliant thesis on Damien Hirst and Thomas Roof. And I was deeply impressed. I mean, he turned out to be totally outstanding. He's now a curator and an artist. But he was a curator of the gallery for a couple of years. And I suppose he, along with Paul Womble, who was the director, invited me to put up 20 years' work and see what it looked like. The Arts Council very generously paid for a book, which gave Jeremy a chance to write a very searching essay on that work. It's about 10,000 words. And these are some of the installation shots. Most of you will have been to the Photographers Gallery, right, in London? Anyone not been? Yeah, most of you have been. So this was like in the bookshop side, what used to be. Of course, it's changed now, it's moved from the front to the back. So it was a great privilege. And we were very interested in making distinctions between images and works. So that, for example, in this picture, we're looking at works on the left-hand side and in the center. And in the far distance, and we'll see some more of those, we're looking at images. And the distinction we made, because we considered that the framed works on the wall, in a sense, they were objects you could buy, you could walk away with, you could carry away. The images, and I think there are some other illustrations, like on the far left, these are 8 by 10 feet, but they're also bonded to the walls of the gallery so that they become architecturally coherent with the space in a very different way to hanging a picture on a wall. And that's a very interesting contrast, not least because the kind of thing which apparently happened, according to one of the gallery sitters, was that the far picture, which we've seen earlier, of going through the bushes, it was so big, it was so life-size, that apparently some people tried to walk down the path, which you wouldn't do with obviously with a smaller framed image. Okay, 2006, an Israeli press book came out. In this book, I'm bringing together many, many photographs. They're all photographs which are quite close-up of relatively small things. But that's in conjunction with the other aspect of the way that this work works for me, and that is that I think that the Earth's surface now looks more than ever the way it does because of the way the human brain directs the hand to change the shape and the nature of materials, so that all of the subjects in this book are relatively small, according to how we understand small, and they are illustrations, in a sense, of the way the brain has directed the hand to change the shape and nature of materials. That's the cover, obviously. Again, this is a Welsh picture, made in a little church, just inland from Aberystwyth, on a very, very sunny summer's Sunday, nobody around, everybody's indoors. And there's a church door, it's open. I do go into churches, but I like open doors. So I go inside, there's nothing open, there's no tea shop or anything. Church is really small, so it's a small village, and doesn't seem to be much going on. But I go to the back of the church because I am very, very curious, I'm a bit nosy. And there's a door, and then there's another door from that little room. So I swing that door open, and there's this sunlight coming through this window, and I see this object. And those are those moments when it is so fantastic to be alive. And I don't care what you think, I think that fluff is really important. This was made in this amazing situation. I was driving out of Liverpool, and I just bought my sandwich, and I thought, I've really got to stop. I don't want to drive and eat. And I was kind of going along the river, and I just saw this little dead-end road. I thought, I know, I'll go down by the river and have my sandwich. So I'm driving down very slowly. It's only about half a mile long. And on the left, through this gap in the hedge and the trees, I thought, that's a bit weird, because I could see what looked like a sort of college or something, but all of the windows were smashed. And I thought, I think I better stop here and just pop out and have a look. And basically, it was as if this college had been abandoned a week early, and everyone had left. Some of the local kids had started smashing the windows, but there were still even pieces of computer equipment and stuff lying around, a bit beaten up. But I had a free reign over the whole afternoon of the entire college, just going from one room to the next. Oh my God. If any of you have heard of Jem Southam, who's a friend of mine, a very talented landscape photographer, this was something, I went down to stay with him, and this was something his daughter had just made just before tea with some bits and bobs on the kitchen table. By the way, these are all made with, even though they were exhibited at 40-60, they were made with a truly remarkable little 35mm camera called a Contax T3. Has anyone got one? Head of photography. It's a tiny little thing. It's like, it would probably fit in that pocket, but it has a lens which is legendary. It's a Carl Zeiss sonar. So it's only a tiny piece of glass, but it's very, very complex and breathtakingly sharp. And easily blew up to 40 by 60 inches. For example, in the 40 by 60 inch print on the wall, that mosquito, you could not only see the legs, but you could see hairs on the legs of the mosquito with that little tiny camera lens. This is the last picture in the Nazreli book. Okay, 2006, I was invited to be an artist in residence at Oxford, along with 3 other artists. This shows you the kind of situation that I was met with. Essentially, there were 4 biochemistry buildings, all kind of different, like a 60s tower block, Victorian building, all a bit of a mishmash. So the department was operating out of several buildings, which was inefficient. So what they were going to do was, first of all, it's going to be in 2 phases. They were going to knock down 2 of the, because they were all next to each other. They're going to knock down 2 buildings, and on that site, on that footprint, Hawkins Brown, who are London architects, were going to make. They designed this amazing new biochemistry building, but the building was going to be built in 2 halves because it was so big. So I was invited to be a photographer, artist in residence, to make new art or new work in the middle of all this mayhem, knocking down the old buildings, all through that process and right through to the unveiling of the new building, which is exactly what I did. I'm first of all going to show you some of the pictures which came out of the commission, and then I'll show you the pictures which the university finally purchased and are now on permanent display in the new building. So these are some of the ones which I shot about 2,000 pictures over 2.5 years. 6, 7, no mere 6, 7. It was really great, as you might be able to imagine, getting back to working with scientists. Because I mean, sometimes scientists are, maybe in the same way that some artists are kind of aloof, and they use language to protect themselves or to protect their areas. But at Oxford, it was just fantastic working with brilliant people who were seriously up for working with artists, and with a serious budget as well. So it was such a joy to be there. In fact, somebody said that it's the longest artist residency, 2.5 years, that has ever been offered to an artist in the UK. And it really did feel, I think for all of us, a great privilege. This is one of the huge drill bits. It's about 1 meter wide, because this building was 4 stories above, the new building, and 2 stories below. But they had to drill much lower than that for, you know, the foundations and stuff. So they had like these huge drills, like about 1 meter wide, and they drilled something like 200 holes, 50 feet deep, to fill with concrete to support the building that finally went up. And again, I mean, I just find, you know, after the first 2 or 3 visits, this huge Irish guy who's in charge of the whole building project, he asked me to come into his office and sat me down. He said, "Peter, what do you think? What do you think about what we're doing here?" And I just said, "John, just one word, respect." Because it just seemed absolutely astonishing what these guys were doing in order to get rid of the old buildings and to make way for the new one. It was a real learning process. And also quite an interesting challenge, because, you know, very often there'd be a meeting with, they say, the professors and some of the other artists about how things were going. So you'd have to come out of one of those meetings and go straight onto site, where you're working with, say, Polish guys or whatever, which is a very, very different kind of conversation you're going to have. I quite like that challenge. And these are the pictures that they purchased. So this is a diptych. It's about 24 feet wide by 10 feet high. And this is on like the first floor. So there's to the right here, there's a huge central atrium, which is about 5 stories high. So this is almost halfway up, this gigantic space. And what was really kind of rewarding was on the opening night. Again, this big Irish guy, John Keneally, the guy in charge of the overall building project, he came along and he came up behind me and he said, "Do you know what that R stands for?" And I had absolutely no idea, but it turns out that on site, I think there were several Polish guys, but there was one particular Polish builder who was crazy about his football team back in Poland, and their name began with an R. So he was going all around the building site, spray painting R's on everything. And I really like the idea that that image has only been made possible because there's somebody who's absolutely passionate about something. And these photographs were all about 48 by 60 inches and framed in a different part of the building in a meeting, in a committee room. And they were chosen, these pictures were chosen during a whole day session with about 10 people, with the professors of biochemistry and the other artist and myself. So they weren't only my choice, and that was a fantastic process to go through too, to see what came out of that consensus. That's below ground, as you can probably guess, and it's getting stuck in. And I think that's the last picture, which seems appropriate. Okay, thank you very much for your patience, and if there are any more questions, I guess this will be a great moment to chuck them at me. Well, I've never had no questions. There was always one. Does anybody think I'm on the wrong track? Yeah.
Just a quick question. You used an expression which I didn't understand, and maybe other people do, and that was you referred to two of your images from the scientific sites as axis pictures. What do you mean by that?
Like conceptual axes, like vertical and horizontal, within which all the work kind of falls. Well, one of those pictures was of a climbing frame that said gravity, so that in a sense, one of the ways we go forward with research is to pull away from or against the gravitational pull of what we know to date. We have to pull very hard away from that, against that, in order to win new territory. And the survey picture I already talked about a little bit, didn't I?
So you mean axis in reference to that specific project rather than being a general term?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very much so.
Sorry,
yeah. Because scientific progress has to come through exploring and pulling hard against, known territories.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there are no more...
Sorry, can I ask you one thing which is not about your work specifically, but
Sure.
Again about that series of questions, my mind, since you were talking about that series, has been intrigued by this notion of how did you refer to the kind of the bad particles, the particles that were too large to be in the clean rooms?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know how they got rid of bad particles in the first instance when they constructed those rooms?
No, that's a very interesting question, yeah. I'd like to know the answer myself. I do find that whole territory absolutely compelling. So I'm with you. I'd like an answer. Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming along.